Okay. नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा. So thank you all very much for joining today's session. So we have been discussing from Harinam Chintamani by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur for the last many months now. So in another about 2 sessions, hopefully we will. I mean, uh, 2 sessions including today's session. Hopefully we will complete this book, and subsequently I am planning to start the book Bhaktya Loka by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur again. So that's also a small book. So just to keep you informed that the Wednesday sessions will keep going. So please stay tuned, and you'll get more details of the Wednesday sessions. So Wednesday sessions will be dedicated to discussing our core Gaudiya books and in detail. So for those who are interested in understanding these books with lot of discussions, Wednesday is the day. So you have to keep the day free for yourself. So, for the next years to come, unless they make some different plan, as of now, the plan is every Wednesday we will continue to some or other one after another various books written by our Gaudiya Vaishnava Acharyas. So now today we will start the last chapter. Actually, Radha Pramod Prabhu is busy with in the middle of a meeting, so he will not be presenting his recap today, but I will send you. He has made the recap, and I will send you the recap tomorrow or tonight. But before that, I will do a small recap of what we saw last 2 sessions, and then we can move on ahead to today's chapter. So first, I'll do a very quick recap of the 13th chapter. So I will share the screen. Just hold on. Okay, so we saw that this is the 10th offense, to maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. So to maintain material attachments, which is mentioned here by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur as attachment to I and mine, right? So this attachment to mind we saw is of 4 types: Atma Buddhi, Swabuddhi, Ijja Buddhi, and Tirtha Buddhi. So the bodily identification is Atma Buddhi. Who am I? I am this body. And what Swabuddhi? What belongs to me? My wife, my sons, my bank balance, house, these all belong to me. Ijja Buddhi, what is worshipable? My place of birth is very worshipable. And Tirtha Buddhi, what is a place of pilgrimage? Where there is a holy water body where I can go and take bath and wash, means that is a place of pilgrimage. So this is bodily consciousness, Sayeva Gokara, as as he says, right? And but the devotee, his understanding is different. Who am I? His devotee's understanding is I am Vaishnavadas, and what is my and what belongs to me? The devotees of Krishna, they belong to me, right? And okay, just hold on for 1 second. I just made a mistake. Just hold on for 1 second. Just 1 second, please. Please hold on. Okay. And then Ijya Buddhi. What is worshipable? Wherever Vaishnavas congregate, that is a worshipable place. And Tirtha Buddhi. What is a place of pilgrimage? Huh? A place of pilgrimage is that where Vaishnavas congregate to hear and chant. That is a place of pilgrimage. So this is the mm, this is the understanding. So this is where an ordinary materialistic person and the devotee differs. But even after coming to Krishna consciousness and taking up to the path of Krishna consciousness, if we maintain these materialistic concepts of I and mind, then it is the 10th offense, right? So and Srila Haridas Thakur, he says actually this concept of maintaining the material conception of I and mind is the exact opposite of cultivating the mood of surrender, cultivating Sharanagati. So Sharanagati has these 6 things. Anukulyasya sankalpo pratikulyasya varjanam rakshishyati iti vishwaso goptrapve varanam tata dainya and atma nikshepa. Accepting whatever is favorable for Krishna's service, rejecting whatever is unfavorable for one's progress on the path of bhakti, having full faith that Krishna is protecting me, and also having full faith that Krishna is maintaining me, and uh, thinking, being very humble and thinking oneself very low, and then finally being self-surrendered. Um, these are the Atmanikshepa. So these are the 6 principles which one should carry, cultivate. And maintaining material attachments is exactly opposite to this principle. It's exactly opposite to this principle, right? So, Srila Haridas mentioned that if one does not culture these attitudes while chanting, one will simply accumulate material in life. So we were discussing last time, what does it mean to culture these attitudes? These 6 attitudes, how do we culture? So you all shared various points. Someone said imbibing these attitudes, nourishing, acting way that these attitudes are nourished, associate with those who have similar attitudes, okay, and continuously trying to implement these attitudes, right? And practice these attitudes, consciously choosing them and not consciously not choosing the unfavorable attitudes, and trying as much as possible to live with this consciousness. Okay, so what we were discussing, and he just briefly explained what these 6 things are. So contrary to the 6th is to think that one is the doer, one is himself the giver, the protector, the maintainer, the owner of this body, the owner of his house, wife, etc. This is all Yasyatma buddhi kunape tridatuke swadik kalatradishu bhauma ijjadi yes tirtha buddhi salilena karhichit janeshu abhigneshu saeva gokara. So this is gokara consciousness. So instead of centering one's thoughts on Krishna, one should think of Krishna. Instead, centering one's thoughts on Krishna, one should think of Krishna as the controller, Krishna as the doer, and Krishna's desire as that for which we have to dedicate our life. So that is what he says. So then in that way, one will try to do what Krishna wishes. And if Krishna wishes, I will stay in this world. And if Krishna wishes, I will cross over it. Hmm. And if in trying to serve Krishna, if there is more and more pain, then I will um, uh, then I will still remain Krishna's servant. If he gives by his will, he will give mercy to the jivas. And my enjoyment or my renunciation is dependent on Krishna. And this is the mood of Atma Nivedana. But if we are not consciously trying to cultivate these 6 attitudes, then definitely we will start cultivating the I and mind consciousness with respect to matter. Okay. So then such a person will think he is the doer. And prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashah ahankara vimodatma karta aham iti manyate. He will think he is the doer. Such people are proud of the power of their own knowledge. Ishwaroham ahambogi siddhoham balavan sukhi adyo abhijanavan asmi konyo asti sadrusho maya kshe dasyami modishya iti agyana vimohita. As Krishna says, this is the attitude of the people who have this I and mind consciousness. They are constantly self-absorbed. Instead of thinking about Krishna, they are continuously absorbed about their own things, right? So, and naturally, such people, when they hear about the glories of Krishna, they do not believe them, and they become pretenders and cheaters, and uh, like that. So therefore, and then they eventually get very tightly bound by Maya. So, so therefore, in such cases, or in any case for that matter, choosing the right kind of association is very, very critical. Choosing the right kind of association is very critical. One should always take the association of those people who are committed to achieving perfection on the path of devotional service. Then gradually one will become fixed in the name, and all this I and mind consciousness will gradually vanish, and one can transcend material existence. So therefore, one should consciously try to culture full surrender. Then gradually one will, in that mood, when one chants the holy name, then gradually one can reach the stage of prema. So one who gives up the 10 offenses and performs devotional service clean is the most fortunate in the 3 worlds. And such a person is full of all good qualities and is qualified for getting Krishna's mercy. So therefore, yasyasti bhaktir bhakti kinchana sarvair gunais samaste sura. If one wants to develop all good qualities and give up all bad qualities, it is possible only when one tries to practice uh, bhakti without the 10 offenses, including this 10th offense. And by that, one can gradually reach Shuddhanam, then Bhavanam, and then Premanam. Okay. And therefore, one should be very careful not to mix their bhakti with karma, yoga, etc. And one should also, this is in practice, and also as a goal, one should not settle for anything less than Krishna Prem, including Mukti. Uh, so then, by carefully performing sadhana without the offenses, the creeper of bhakti will grow and very quickly yield the fruits of prema. Right? So this is where we ended our discussion. So this is where we completed this chapter, right? And then we discussed the very quickly completed the 14th chapter of I'm sorry, just hold on. The 14th chapter which was Seva Aparad, offenses in serving the deities. Here we saw that uh, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu requested Srila Haridas Thakur to speak about Seva Aparad, very humbly he said, "Oh, this Seva Aparad, actually those who are qualified to perform deity worship, they should speak about it. Anyway, I am not qualified to touch and serve the deities, so how can I speak about it? But still, because you have requested me to speak, I'll speak about Seva Aparad," he says. And he talks about the offenses to deities can be divided into four types. Offenses in directly serving the deity. There are some other offenses in establishing the deity, in taking darshan of the deity, and there are general offenses committed against the deity. And then he quotes 32 offenses which are listed in, I think, Padma Puran. Here it says Bhagavatam, but Bhagavatam does not quote these 32. Bhakti Rasam Sindhu does, but Bhakti Rasam Sindhu does quoting Padma Puran and then Varaha Puran. So Padma Puran, these 32 offenses which we saw last time, and there are other 50 offenses quoted in the Varaha Puran that is mentioned, 50 or 40. So when a devotee commits a seva aparad, he should rectify it immediately. And with the nama aparad, he must be constantly rectifying, improving, and avoiding this nama aparad. So like that. So this way we ended this chapter also. So today we will be starting the 15th chapter, which is the last chapter of this book. So this chapter is titled Bhajan Pranali. So what it is, we will see. But before that, if there are any quick comments, discussion points, questions based on what discussed last week and have summarized this week, I will pause for a few seconds to see if there are any discussion points remaining before we move on to today's discussion. Anything anyone would like to share, ask? Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Mataji, your voice is breaking. Your voice is breaking, Mataji. I'm not able to hear it properly.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
There is some signal problem at your end. Yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Yes,
Hare
Mataji,
Krishna,
you can please
Prabhuji.
speak.
Yeah. Prabhuji, the 32 offenses which is mentioned, three things I did not understand: not glorifying the Guru, and offering incense without a fragrant flower, and offering unsuitable flower during puja. These three things is not clear.
Okay. One is not respecting the Guru.
Yeah. Glorifying the
Yeah,
Guru.
not glorifying the Guru is offense, right?
Yeah.
One should always glorify the Guru. So, I mean, I don't know where is the doubt there.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, one should always glorify the Guru. That's why in the mornings we sing Gurvashtakam, which is glorification of Guru. And then after then we have Guru Puja, which is also glorification of Guru. So glorifying the Guru is a very vital part of our worship. So that we have to definitely do.
Okay.
So yeah, and then what else?
Offering incense without a fragrant flower.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I understand, one should, as far as possible, offer fragrant flowers for the deities. And non-fragrant flowers should generally be avoided. Yeah, and then?
Okay, this only. And offering unsuitable flower during puja. Unsuitable.
Yeah, there are certain flowers which are unsuitable, like hibiscus. Because these are all offered for Lord Shiva's worship or Durga's worship. There are certain flowers which are meant for worship of the other demigods. They are not for Vishnu worship. And if one has to even worship, I'll just unmute you. There is some background noise I'm hearing. So, and there is um, mm, there is a conversation in the Padma Puran between Lord Brahma and Lord Vishnu. Lord Brahma approaches Lord Vishnu and he asks, "My dear Lord, can you please tell me how do we worship you with proper use of uh, flowers and fruits? What should be offered, what should not be offered, what can be offered, what cannot be offered? Can you please speak about it?" Like that he requests. So Lord Lord Vishnu, he starts speaking to Brahma and he gives a big list. He says in which season which flowers should be offered in the morning, which flowers should be offered in the afternoon, which flowers should be offered in the evening. Like that, there is a big list that he gives. I mean, of course, these are like very mind-boggling. But at least there are certain flowers which cannot be offered to the Supreme Lord. And there is another thing that he says that when it comes to offering flowers or fruits or vegetables, he says that the best is if you have a dedicated garden where you grow flowers and fruits and vegetables just for the Lord, that is the best that can be offered to the Lord. Of course, in today's day age, that may be little difficult for most people. And then he says second best is that you have a home garden where you grow flowers for your own consumption, but at the same time you also grow flowers for um grow flowers and fruits for Supreme Lord. So when you offer those flowers and fruits, that is the second best option. Then the third best option is you go to the forest and which does not belong to anyone. Go to the forest and collect some forest flower fruits and offer to the Supreme Lord. This is the third best option. So these three are sort of best, better, good. Now there are two more things which are bad and worst, which are generally not recommended, but still in today's day and age, at least we have to live with the fourth option. He says that the fourth best option is purchase flowers and fruits and offer to the Supreme Lord. He says this is the fourth, but this is not generally not very much recommended, he says. But of course, in today's and age, we cannot be so strict because to get a place to stay itself in today's day and age is very difficult. So what to speak of having a personal garden or a dedicated garden for the Supreme Personality of Godhead? That is out of question for most people. But this is the fourth one, and fifth is to steal flowers or fruits from someone else's garden and then offer it to the Supreme Lord. Of course, this is certainly not recommended like that. So in that way, when it comes to where do you procure your flowers and fruits from, these kind of guidelines are given in Padma Purana by the Supreme Lord. And uh, and regarding what flowers and fruits one can offer and what flowers and fruits one cannot offer, there are also details given in Padma Puran. So if someone wants to really perform such kind of a dedicated worship, then one can always refer to these books like that. Okay, Ruchi Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, am I audible?
Yes, Mataji.
Okay, Prabhuji, my question is just regarding this Paricharya only, the Archanam that we do. Now, Sanatan Goswami wrote the book on Hari Bhakti Vilas, and a few years back, I had a chance to read through the entire matter. So, I mean, in this age, since the holy name is recommended and not so much of Archanam, and Sri Sanatan Goswami is such an exalted devotee, then who will be able to practice those rules and regulations as per Hari Bhakti Vilas? I mean, I read that once and it was like 24 hours you need for proper Vishnu worship in your own home temple.
Mhm. Did someone recommend that you read that book,
No,
Mate?
no, no. I just heard in one of the lectures. So out of inquisitiveness, I read myself.
Okay,
I
okay,
read
okay,
out
okay.
of inquisitiveness. All I was wondering was in this age, since Paricharya is not so much possible, as like you said, we can't have a garden for the Lord. Most of us don't have. I also have a very small garden at house, and I also get seasonal flowers only for my picture deities. I hardly get the proper flowers which are recommended. And during the Kartik season, also I was searching for the flowers that are recommended. That during the Vishnu Panchaka, that today you offer this flower to the feet and this to the thigh and the navel. So mostly I go to the florist to search if I ever want to offer like lotus flowers, etc., because they're not available in our garden. And there it was in so much detail. My question is, in this age, how could the exalted devotee like Sri Sanatan Goswami have given the guidelines which are so, I mean, he has done such a great favor by giving that guidelines, but who would be able to ever even follow that? So why is that book written in this age itself is my question.
At least someone will try to follow whatever one. And when one cannot do it, one will at least feel embarrassed and feel humble and feel repentant and offer uh, prayers and repentance to the Supreme. So just because we cannot follow particular standards does
Yeah,
not mean that we should not know what is the top standard of treating the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
that
So,
is that.
and when
That,
you know that
yeah.
you cannot do it, rather
Hmm.
than pulling the standard down, we can at least compensate it with deep regret, expressing that we are not able to serve you the way you deserve to be served. At least it can evoke those feelings which can actually to some extent compensate for the lack of
Yeah,
quality
yeah.
items that we can offer.
Yeah, because Prabhuji, I absolutely agree with you, because a couple of years back when I read that book, that time I was not in the country. So where I was, all I could offer to God was I had to actually purchase flowers from some Indian market and then offer for my Archanam. So I was really wondering that I am not even able to perform, especially even 1% of that entire stuff, even no matter how hard I try. So I really felt very humbled out. But I was just wondering, in this age, is anybody able to follow those guidelines, since Shri Sanatan Goswami has been doing the great favor to tell us that this is the standard of Vishnu worship. Okay, in Dwapar age we could have done, I can agree, the life was long, facilities, material resources were there, but who is able to follow that standard now? As I'm just wondering for that.
One thing for your information, Prabhupada never recommended that we read that book.
Okay.
So Prabhupada said, someone read Hari Bhakti Vilas and Prabhupada said, who has read it?
Okay.
So this was something because uh, Prabhupada realized that as and when the age is progressing, Prabhupada gave something which is possible. And Prabhupada, it's not that Prabhupada did not give deity worship guideline, but
Right.
even in temple deity worship, Prabhupada did not necessarily recommend that they design their temple worship based on the guidelines of Hari Bhakti Vilas, because Prabhupada also felt that these are high. So Prabhupada, when someone went and told Prabhupada, this is what Hari Vilas says, and he asked, who asked you to read Hari Bhakti Vilas? He said, if you
Okay.
want to follow the standards of Hari Bhakti Vilas, one can even come out of the bathroom because the standards are so high, like that.
Yeah,
So,
I
Sanatan
absolutely.
Goswami, so actually, there are so many principles which are there. Like, say, for example, um, like you cannot sit you cannot use any object that has been used by your guru, because anything that has been used by the guru is fit to be worshipped.
Right.
It cannot be used by the disciple.
Right.
But now in an ISKCON
Right.
type of setup, the Vyasasan is
Right.
used by the guru,
Right.
and he sits and gives classes. And it's not a guru has a separate Vyasasan. And some days, and it's not that 365 days a year the only sits and gives classes in that Vyasasan.
Right.
That's a traditional, in a traditional matha, where the guru does not travel outside the matha, but he stays mostly inside. So the Vyasasan is exclusively used by the guru. But in an ISKCON style setup, where you have to eventually use the same Vyasasan which the guru uses. And worst still, the guru has to use that Vyasasan which you have used. So
Okay.
now how do you reconcile this when it is not recommended that you use
Mhm.
the same object which the guru has used? Now, how
Right.
much more bad it is if the guru has to use something that you have used?
Right.
So, Srila Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj commenting on this, he says that look, there are lofty guidelines, and many of the things in ISKCON type of setup, it may be not possible to follow,
Right.
right? But he says that but that does not mean that you don't get to know what the standards are. At
What does
least when you know what the standard is, and when you see that you are not able to follow the standard, at least you will feel repentant, and you will, in a regretful mood, that regret will generate some humility and some prayerful mood, and that regret, humility, and prayerful mood can compensate for our inability to follow the standards actually.
I absolutely agree, Prabhuji. That's the right thing. After reading, I just felt what I'm doing is only 1% of what actually I should be doing. So just 1% of Archanam is possible and not more than that. At Axe, that's what I feel. Though I keep trying my best, but yeah, sometimes I try for lotus flowers, but my only option is the florist because they don't grow in my garden. So thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anything else anyone would like to share, add, ask? Okay, so we will now continue then. The 15th chapter, which is Bhajana Pranali. That's what the chapter is titled. So how the holy name, by cultivating or by culturing the holy name, how gradually one can reach the stage of prema. This is what we are going to discuss now in this chapter. This is the last chapter, as I mentioned. Okay. Gadai Gauranga Jaya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Sita Nata Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. The Lord said, Haridas, by your devotion you have received all knowledge available in the universe. All the Vedas are dancing on your tongue. All the conclusions of scriptures are in your speech. Now speak clearly about the rasa, the sentiment or mellow of the holy name. How does the jiva get qualification for the rasa of the name? Which means how the jiva gradually, by chanting the holy name, can come to a stage where he can establish a relationship with Krishna in one of the rasas. That's what is the question. So Haridas in great bliss said, through your inspiration, I will describe it. So we were discussing in our discussion before that the holy name, just to give you a very quick recap of what we saw, the holy name can be chanted either as aparad, namaprad, or namabhas, or shuddhanam, or bhavanam, or premanam, right? But what is called as namaprad is of two different types, right? So one is the kind of aparad nam which is chanted atheists and mayavadis who are outright inimical towards the Supreme Lord. And the second type is the aparad nam which is chanted by the devotees, which is because of some carelessness and due to some incomplete sambandha gyan, they may commit some offenses. Okay, so these two are different, and this kind of aparad nam chanted by the Mayavadis and atheists, which due to a malicious nature, this actually leads, makes them go to hell actually. But the devotees, when they chant aparad nam due to sometimes carelessness and sometimes due to incomplete sambandha gyan, if offenses are avoided, then they can achieve namabhas. So if they carefully try to avoid the offenses, then they can reach namabhas. Then there is something called as namabhas. In namabhas also there are two types, which is shraddha namabhas and ashraddha namabhas. Okay. So, and shraddha namabhas means when the holy name is chanted with faith. But here there are two types of faith. One is pure faith. Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karma dhyanavritam anukulyena krishnanashilanam faith. So when devotees chant with that pure faith, and when they are very intently chanting, very carefully trying to avoid the 10 offenses, then that kind of an endeavor of chanting is called as chaya namabhas, where the practitioner has pure faith and is sincerely endeavoring to avoid the offenses. That is chaya namabhas. Then there is something called as pratibimba namabhas, where the faith is mixed faith. So karma mishra or karma mishra bhakti or jnana mishra bhakti, like that, or yoga mishra bhakti, these are all mixed faith, right? So this is also so when chaya namabhas, when it matures, it leads to shuddha nam, but pratibimba namabhas, when it matures, it leads to shantarati, salokya mukti, which is less than Krishna prema. They can go to Vaikuntha, but they cannot achieve Krishna prema. They can achieve only salokya mukti. So this is shraddha namabhas, where the practitioner has some faith in chanting the holy name. And namabhas is of another type also, which is ashraddha namabhas, where the person he knows nothing about the holy name. He has not much faith in the glories of the holy name. And at the same time, he does not have an offensive attitude also. He does not commit the 10, most of the namaparas. He does not offend, he has not offended a devotee and things like that. So sometimes when such devotees like Ajamil, who had not committed any kind of namaparad, and at the same time, they may not have faith in the holy name also. When such people they chant, sometimes this can lead to 4 different kinds of ashraddha namabhas, which is called as sanketya namas, parihasya namabhas, toba namabhas, and hela namabhas. Where sanketyam is when you are addressing someone else, like Ajamil was calling his son, and parihasyam is when you jokingly chant the holy name, or sometimes tobam or helanam. These are like very not so with not so attentiveness, when very casually chanted. So such chanting, when performed by those people who are free from offensive attitude, it can at the most lead to achieving impersonal liberation. Okay. So this is about namabhas. So we saw aparadnam, we saw namabhas, but when uh, when when a person with pure faith is very intently trying to overcome the offenses over a long period of time, then gradually the chaya namabhas leads Shuddhanam, and that Shuddhanam matures into Bhavanam, where a person chants at the stage of Bhava, and that Bhavanam leads to Premanam, and that Premanam generates what is called as Rasa. So that is what is described here, right? The path of the practicing devotee is first, he may initially be chanting offensive name, Nama Parad, but gradually when he endeavors to overcome the offenses, when he comes to the stage of Chaya Namabhas, and the Chaya Namabhas matures into Shuddhanam, Shuddhanam matures into Bhavanam, Bhavanam matures into Premanam, and that Premanam, at the stage of Premanam, one experiences Rasa, one of the 5 rasas with Krishna, right? So this is the thing. So any quick comments, discussion points on this topic? We have discussed this before, but still I just wanted to, because we are going to we are discussing about rasa, I just wanted to revise it once. Any quick comments, discussion points, doubts, questions on this topic? Okay, there is something in the chat box. Bhavanam and Bhava Bhakti, are they the same stage? Yes. The holy name chanted by a person at the stage of Bhava Bhakti, it's called as Bhavanam, that which is endowed with Bhava. Okay. Venkat going through.
Prabhu, we are talking about namabhas. What actually is the meaning of abhas?
Good question. Abhas means shadow. So namabhas means that which is shadow. So the word shadow has two different connotations. One is shadow means it is just a shadow, it has no sense. It is like an empty bullet. That is one of the connotations of the word namabhas. So therefore, when the Shastras say one should chant the real name and not abhas nam, one should chant real nam but not abhas nam. In the sense, one should try to chant purely and not chant with offenses which make which remove the potency from the holy name. But shadow also means has another connotation. As a shadow always follow uh, the person. So that shadow ends, that real person begins. Okay, if you see the shadow, it emanates from the feet of that person, and where that shadow ends at his feet, the real personality starts, which means namabhas actually heralds the rising of Shuddhanam. So this is talking about chaya namabhas. So therefore abhas means shadow, and shadow has these two connotations. One is um, uh, it has no substance. So in that case, namabhas means aparadnam, that which is done without any faith, or with accomplished faith, or with lot of offenses. That will not have potency. But another meaning is aparadnam namabhas shuddhanam. That namabhas which comes before shuddhanam, which is chaya namabhas, there the meaning of the word shadow is when the show ends, the real nam will start, or shuddhanam will start, like that. Is that relevant, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. It's clear now. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Okay, there are some questions in the chat box here. Okay, one is, but then at bhava the rasa is revealed, but here it is told that after prema one realizes rasa. Yeah, at the stage of bhava, rasa begins. It is not exactly called as rasa, it is called as rati. It is one stage before rasa. Rasa in a budding stage is called as rati. So, Shantarati, Dasyarati, Sakhyarati. So these are all rati, but rasa begins at the stage of prema only. But all the key ingredients of rasa are there in a budding stage at the stage of bhava. So in one sense, you can say rasa is there, but in another sense, it is not rasa like that. Okay. So then there is another question in the chat box here. What is the difference between Mayavadis and Brahmavadis and their destination? Well, okay, Mayavadis means those who Mayavadis are those who think that the form of the Lord is an illusion. The personal form of the Lord does not exist. Brahma Satya Jagan Mithya, this whole material is an illusion. The individual existence of the jivas are an illusion. So everything is Maya, 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 Maya. That's what that is there as Mayavadis. And their destination is hell, because they reject they consider the most transcendental and a spiritual form of the Lord to be an illusion, which is a great offense. But Brahmavadis are like those people whose desire might be to merge in the impersonal Brahma Jyoti, but in reality, when it comes to worshipping, they worship the personal form of the Lord. They accept the personal form of the Lord to be real. They worship that form also, but in worshipping that form, they have an attachment to the impersonal Brahmajyoti of the Lord, because their um, their bhakti is not so evolved. They have a very stunted growth of devotion. So therefore, with that stunted development of their devotional creeper, they don't feel inspired to aspire for the personal form of the Lord, personal abode of the Lord. So they get attracted to the Brahmajyoti like that. Okay. Next question. Is there any way to chant Shuddhanam without going through Namabhas? No. Rare. Generally not. Sometimes maybe in when someone chants, when someone gets some Kripa Siddhi, it may be possible, but generally it's rare. When and how will Pratibimba Namabhas become Chaya Namabhas? Well, Pratibimba Namabhas can become Chaya Namabhas only if that person practicing Pratibimba Namabhas, which means a mixed devotee, comes in touch with a pure devotee. And if his heart gets purified and his motivations for practicing bhakti gets rectified, then in such a case, a practitioner of Pratibimba Namabhas can come to the stage of Chaya Namabhas. Next question. How anarthas and offenses are related? Is it possible that someone who is not doing any offenses can still have anarthas? When distractions are there while chanting, how do I understand if it is because of offenses? Well, good. How are anarthas and offenses related? Well, there are some anarthas which are connected to offenses. There are anarthas are of four types. Dushkritotta anarthas, Sukrutotta anarthas, Bhaktiyotta anarthas, and Aparadotta anarthas. So there are four types of anarthas. Dushkritotta, first thing, anartha means a desire which is unfavorable for progressing on the path of bhakti. So when we develop desires which are unfavorable for progressing on the path of bhakti, these unfavorable desires, they have 4 different sources. The first source is dushkrutotanarthas. If before coming to bhakti, if we had a very sinful life, then due to that sinful life and performing those sinful activities, we develop some sinful vasanas or impressions, which generate desires which are not very favorable for our progress path of bhakti. Okay, these are called as dushkrutotanarthas. Okay, this has some nothing to do with um, mm, this has nothing to do with offenses. Then there are some offenses, some anarthas or unfavorable desires which we may develop due to a pious upbringing also. These are called as sukrutotanarthas, because not all um, mm, not all pious habits are favorable for devotional service, right? I can give you many examples, but there are many pious habits which may not be very favorable for Krishna consciousness. So sometimes we may develop some unfavorable attitudes which may not be very favorable for Krishna consciousness because of our pious upbringing also. Generally, pious habits are very favorable for Krishna consciousness, but there could be some cases where certain pious conditionings are not very favorable for one's progress on the path of bhakti. So this is Sukrutottanarthas. Then the third are Bhaktiyottanarthas. Bhaktiyottanarthas means when we are properly practicing bhakti, then we naturally progress on the path of bhakti. And when we progress on the path of bhakti, then we develop a lot of good qualities. Uh, uh, and then when we develop a lot of good quality, when people observe that we are progressing on the path of bhakti, then they will start glorifying us, giving us a lot of respect, giving us a lot of mm, facilities. And gradually what happens, because of that, we may develop some pride, we may develop some uh, uh, you know, puja, labh, pratishta, it may to our head, and we may start expecting it. And when people are not respecting us, then we may feel very offended and things like that. So these things are very unfavorable. These are very unfavorable desires which may be very not so favorable for our progress on the path of devotional service. So these are called as Bhaktiyotta Anarthas. And then the fourth type is Aparadotta Anarthas. When we commit offenses towards the holy name, the various kinds of 10 offenses, they can also generate unfavorable desires within our heart in the form of lust, anger, greed, like that. They can also generate such desires. So they're called as Bhaktiyotanarthas. So is there a connection between offenses and anarthas? Yes. But they are but offenses are not the only reason for someone to develop unfavorable desires on the path of devotional service. There are other reasons also, like that. Is that okay, bro? Mahipal, bro. Okay. 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 So now let's continue our discussion. If there are no further questions. Okay. The highest purest state, the perfection of absolute truth is called as rasa. Okay, there is another question. How do we understand that the anarthas are because of offense? Well, it is better to assume that the anarthas are because of offense and actually take some steps to rectify our offensive attitude. And even so in that case, even if they are not due to offense, but still it will help us favorably progress on the path of devotional studies. Okay, so the purest state, the perfection of the absolute truth is called rasa. So the perfection of the absolute truth. So absolute truth, as we understand, is generally understood in three stages. Vadanti tat tattvavidas tattvam yad gyadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdate. Right. So the absolute truth is realized in three stages, or the absolute truth is realized in three, yeah, you can say three stages: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Right. So so this is Brahman realization is understood or realized by those who have very weak bhakti. So when people's bhakti samskaras are very weak, when their bhakti impressions are very weak, then it is very difficult for them to understand, appreciate, relate to the absolute truth, possessing some form, some activities, everything. It's very difficult for them. So they can relate to the absolute truth as being impersonal energy. Okay. So this is because they lack, devotional strength. But gradually, when they progress and gain more and more devotional credits, then it becomes little bit more easier for them to understand and appreciate that the absolute truth can possess a form, the absolute can possess some qualities, the absolute truth can possess some activities. Okay, but still they can see that the absolute truth can perform activities only with respect to this material world, in terms of creating, maintaining, and destroying this material world, and assisting the living entities in their enjoyment in this material world. So this level of understanding and appreciating the Supreme Lord is called as Paramatma realization. Right? But then there is the highest, the still higher level of realization of the absolute truth is when one understands and accepts that the absolute truth can have a form, can have name, can have activities with respect to creating, maintaining, and destroying this universe. But apart from that, the absolute truth can also have activities, personal activities in relationship with their devotees. They can have sweet exchanges with their devotees in the spiritual world. So which means, so this is actually Bhagavan realization. Okay. So these are not Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are not three different personalities or three different entities. It is, they are the same, but three different, how the absolute truth is perceived by a person who possesses very weak devotional vision, medium devotional vision, and proper devotional vision. So when these three personalities observe the same object, which is absolute truth, one sees that object as Brahman, another sees that object as Bhagavan, another sees that object as Paramatma. Right? But then, um, uh, but then at the highest stage, there is one stage even higher than this, and that is not just understand that the Supreme Lord is Bhagavan, but that Bhagavan is actually Akhila Rasamrita Murti. He can perfectly reciprocate with every single living entity according to the rasa that he wishes to have with the Supreme Lord. So this is the highest. That's why here he says the highest, purest state, the perfection of the absolute truth is called as rasa. This rasa is not the emotions or sentiments of the material world, but is the inherent nature of the absolute pure. It is unlimited, full of bliss and the greatest glory. The absolute truth reveals his variegated character through his energies, which are inseparable from his very existence, abhinna. His energies create the variegated spiritual world, which is a prerequisite to rasa. So, if you want to have exchanges, um, mm, very favorable exchanges, which are very sweet, then you need a form which is very sweet, you need name which is very sweet, and you want an ambience or a place which is very which stimulates that rasa, and you must have some activities, some exchanges between the lover and the beloved, which also stimulate that rasa, right? So the spiritual energy of the Supreme Lord, they actually reveal the Nama, Rupa, Dhama, and Leela of the Supreme Lord, which can actually stimulate that mood, right? So that's what is being described here. The energies create the variegated spiritual world, which is the prerequisite to rasa. So the Supreme Lord has many energies. Parasya Shaktir Vividaiva Shruyate, Swabhaviki Jnana Bala Kriyacha. But in general, you can divide the energies of the Lord into three categories: Antaranga Shakti, Bahiranga Shakti, and Tatastha Shakti. So, through Antaranga Shakti, Antaranga Shakti generates the spiritual world, the spiritual form of the Lord, the spiritual activities of the Lord are all controlled and devised by the Antaranga Shakti. Then the Bahiranga Shakti, or the external energy of the Lord, this actually manifests the material universe, where those living entities who have turned their face away from Krishna, their enjoyment can be facilitated, right? And the Tatastha generates or manifests the Tatastha Jivatmas. So in this way, there are different energies, but the energy which manifests the spiritual world, the Nam, Dham, form, and activities of the Supreme Lord, these are actually the that's the spiritual energy of the Lord. Then the supreme truth is known as Krishna with a Sham Sundar form residing in Golokadam, performing a sweet pastimes with his devotees. This is the supermost form, right? Aradhyo Bhagavan Rajeshatane Stadha Vrindavanam. Thus, variety and rasa exist in the Lord due to his spiritual energies, which cannot be separated or differentiated from the substance of the Lord. Abhinna. Lord and rasa cannot be separated. Just as orange and orange juice cannot be separated, right? When the juice is not there, then it is no longer called an orange. It is orange because it has that orange flavored juice. When it is not there, then it is no longer orange, actually. So in the same way, Krishna and his uh, uh, rasa cannot be separated. In this way, the absolute truth remains supreme, whole, beyond duality, and simultaneously engages in the transcendental world full of beautiful forms, activities, and emotions. Okay. So the absolute truth remains the supreme whole beyond the material duality, but simultaneously he exists in the spiritual world, which is full of beautiful forms, activities, and emotions. He has nothing to do with material forms, activities, and emotions, and he has everything to do with spiritual forms, activities, and emotions. Right? So then the shadow energy of the Lord, spiritual energy, is called Maya, Chaya. Right? Chayeva yasya bhuvanani bibharti durga. By the will of Krishna, this energy creates the material world outside of the spiritual dimension. So while spiritual energy or the Antaranga Shakti creates the spiritual dham, its shadow energy or the material energy creates the material world. Right? So through his Jiva Shakti or Tatastha Shakti, he creates innumerable jivas situated between the material and spiritual worlds, similar in quality to Krishna but infinitesimal in size. So there are the three energies, Antaranga Shakti, Bahiranga Shakti, and Tatastha Shakti. So the Tatastha Shakti creates the Tatastha Jivas or manifests the Tatastha Jivas. Okay. So because of their borderline quality, the Jivas are of two types, eternally bound Jivas and eternally liberated Jivas. These are Nitya Muktas and Nitya Baddhas. Okay. Those who are eternally liberated are qualified as Krishna's eternal servants in the spiritual sky. And those who are eternally bound engage and suffer in the material shadow away from Krishna. Right? So those who are eternally liberated, they engage in Krishna's service in the spiritual. Of course, this is a more simplistic classification. There is a little more detailed classification which is given in Jaiva Dharma, but this is a more simplistic classification. So like that. So those who have turned their face towards Krishna, they are in the spiritual world engaged in Krishna's service. Okay. And the jivas dwelling in the material world are of two types. Those taking Krishna's name and associating with devotees who will go to the spiritual world of rasa, the power of the name. And those who ignore Krishna and toil hopelessly for rasa in relation to inert matter. So there are two categories of people in this material world. The first category are those who accept Krishna's name. The first category are those who accept Krishna's name, accept Krishna's form, accept the path of devotional service. Okay, and they worship the Supreme Lord. And so such people gradually, by the power of their practice of devotional service, they will go to the spiritual world. The second category of people are those who ignore Krishna, and therefore they toil hopelessly for rasa in relationship with this material world. But rasa in relationship with this material world or material rasa, as Bhakti Rasam Sindhu in Bhakti Rasam Sindhu Srila Prabhupada describes, it has the nature is bhoga tyaga and chapala sukha. Bhoga tyaga means you enjoying it with great eagerness, but after some time you don't experience any juice in that thing, so you give it up. And then after some time you again feel like enjoying that same object, you go and enjoy, and after some you don't experience any pleasure, you give it up. So this is bhoga tyaga, like that. So, and the second symptom is chapala sukha. Even whatever bhoga that is seen in that object, it is very insignificant. Whatever pleasure that is seen in that object is actually very insignificant, right? So therefore, when the jiva does not want to experience rasa with respect to Krishna, and he becomes adamant to enjoy rasa only with respect to this material world and material things, then he hopelessly toils without getting any proper pleasure out of it. Then, okay. So then he says that the gradual realization of rasa in the name is compared to the blossoming of a flower. The name is compared to a flower in bud when it is spread to the general mass of people in the world. When one realizes the beautiful form of Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan through continual chanting of the name, that is compared to the partially opened flower. Continuing sadhana further, when Krishna's 64 qualities become revealed in the name, that is compared to the fragrance from the half-opened flower. When one realizes the eternal pastimes of Krishna and Goloka Vrindavan, the flower is in full bloom. You see? So he says the gradual realization of rasa in the name is compared to the blossoming of a flower. Okay. So the name is compared to a flower in bud. So budding form. So when the flower is in a budding form, so it is spread to the general mass of people in the world. So the qualification for nama, qualification is only Shraddha. All that is needed is just faith in the holy name. That's all. So then he is qualified to chant the holy name. Okay. But at what stage does this holy name give rise to or reveals the rupa or form? When one realizes the beautiful form of Krishna and Goloka Vrindavan through continual chant of the name, that is compared to the partially opened flower. So this is Nama reveals Rupa at the stage of Nishta. When gradually by chanting the holy name, therefore he says continual chanting of the name. So this continual chanting is possible only at the stage of Nishta. So at stage of Nishta, by one actually reaches the stage of Rupa is revealed at the stage of Nishta. Then continuing sadhana further, when Krishna's 64 qualities become revealed in the name, that is compared to the fragrance from the half-opened flower. Okay. So this happens at the stage of asakti. Okay, where guna is revealed. And when one realizes the eternal pastimes of Krishna and Goloka Vrindavan, the flower is in full bloom. This is Leela gets revealed at the stage of Asakti. I'm sorry, Guna gets revealed at the stage of Ruchi. And Leela gets revealed at the stage of Asakti. So now we may say, oh, when I chant the holy name, I also meditate on the form of the Lord, Rupa of the Lord. So maybe I must be at the stage of Nishta, someone may say. Or someone may say, oh, yeah, for me, it's very easy to meditate on the qualities of the Lord when I'm chanting the holy name. Maybe I should be at the stage of Ruchi. Or someone says, oh, it is very natural when I chant the holy name. I always meditate on the Leela of the Lord. So maybe I must be at the stage of Asakti. Someone may feel like that. Well, we have to see whether we are forcefully and artificially doing it ourselves, or is the name naturally and spontaneously revealing the Nama, the Rupa, Guna, and Leela for us. We have to see, because there are very specific symptoms of people who have reached this stage, these stages. For example, the symptoms of Nishta, the stage at which the holy name reveals the form of the Lord, is, Nishta is characterized by absence of the following symptoms. Okay. Laya. One does not feel sleepy while one is either chanting the holy name or hearing Krishna Katha or doing Krishna Kirtan, right? So when one overcomes Laya, so when one is troubled by Laya, then it is a symptom that one has not actually reached the stage of Nishta. While chanting or while hearing or while Sankirtan, when one feels sleepy, then it means that one has not yet reached the stage of Nishta. The second symptom is the absence of Vikshepa. Vikshepa means distraction. Okay, distraction towards mundane talk while performing service. That is gossiping while doing japa, or checking one's WhatsApp messages while doing japa, or if one gets distracted by these things, or anything for that matter. Such a distraction is a symptom of lack of Nishta, which means one is still within the stage of Anarthana Vritti, which means with that kind of chanting, Nama cannot reveal Rupa. Nama cannot reveal Rupa. And then comes the third symptom, which is Apratipatti. Apratipatti means lack of taste, lack of interest in lack of interest in Krishna Katha or Krishna Kirtan or Krishna Nama Japa. So this is actually Apratipatti. So this Apratipatti, if someone feels like, oh, today I don't have much interest or taste for chanting the holy name, if one feels like that, then it means that he has not yet reached the stage of Nishta. Because at the stage of Nishta, there is no point at which a person feels a lack of taste or a lack of interest in either chanting the holy name or hearing Krishna Katha. There is at no stage, at no point, there is that lack of taste, right? Then the fourth symptom of Nishta is the absence of Kashaya. Kashaya means bad habits. One is no longer troubled by past bad habits at the stage of Nishta. So if one is still troubled by past bad habits, then he has not yet reached the stage of Nishta. And at that level of chanting, Nama cannot reveal Rupa. And the fifth symptom of Nishta is Rasaswada, absence of Rasaswada. What is Rasaswada? Rasaswada means when there is an opportunity for Krishna consciousness, when there is an opportunity for sense gratification. Like for example, you are sitting and chanting, suddenly, from the chin, there is a fragrance of your favorite prasad that is coming and it is entering your nostril. So as when there is an opportunity for sense gratification, then our ability to concentrate on our sadhana becomes very, very compromised, or at least somewhat compromised. But at the stage of Nishta, whether an opportunity to enjoy there or not there, it does not compromise the extent of their practice of Krishna consciousness. So, Nishta, the stage of Nishta, the stage at which Nama naturally and spontaneously reveals Rupa, is characterized by the absence of these 5 qualities. That one does not feel sleepy while or lethargic while engaging in Krishna conscious activities. One does not feel distracted while engaging in Krishna conscious activities. One does not have even occasional lack of taste or interest in engaging in Krishna conscious activities. And one is no longer troubled by bad habits. And in the presence of an opportunity to engage in sense gratification, still a person is not distracted in his practice of Krishna consciousness. So, if one has all these characteristics, then while chanting, when one is able to remember the form of the Lord, then that is bona fide. Otherwise, one is trying to artificially do it. So, these are the symptoms of Nishta, the stage at which Nama reveals Rupa. Right? Any quick comments, discussion points? I think there are I saw some questions in the chat box. Once in Manasiksha class, you had very well learned the cause of Jiva fall down. Could you please repeat it for the benefit of others and myself too? It will be a revision as well. Well, okay. I mean, I don't want to distract anyone because that's a whole different discussion. I don't want to get into that right now. Maybe some other time we could do that. Does Nitya Baddha always bound in the material world? Why they were given this name? Well, from the material time point of view, if you see, he has always been bound. But what is the exact meaning of the word Nitya Baddha? We'll be able to understand only when we actually reach the stage of Krishna Prema. And when we experience spiritual time. So in terms of when one who can experience spiritual time, he can perfectly understand what is the real meaning of this Nitya Baddha and Nitya Siddha. Right. So anyway, but one meaning of Nitya, which is given by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, is perfect. So Nitya Baddha means one who is perfectly bound. And Nitya Siddha means one who is perfectly liberated or Nitya Mukta means one who is perfectly liberated, like that. Anyway, there's another question here in the chat box. When I chant in temple hall, there is one particular devotee. Thoughts are constantly about that devotee only, irrespective of how much ever I try and pray to the Lord to focus my mind on mantra. How do I understand if it is because of envy towards the devotee or any offenses leading to envy? Well, we can, as well as I mentioned before, we can assume that it is due to offenses only, and try to work on our offensive attitude. So in that case, even if it is not due to offenses, but still it will help us. So this is a good practice. That's what I would say. Another question, Namagane Sadaruchi. So continual chanting will come in Ruchi stage, right? No, continual chanting will come at the stage of Nishta, but taste for chanting comes at the stage of Ruchi. Matlab, a very power taste for chanting comes at the stage of Ruchi. But this Namagana Sadaruchi, that symptom that you are mentioning, that level of Namagane Sadaruchi, always having great taste for chanting the holy name, this happens at the stage of Bhava. In fact, this is one of the 9 symptoms, 9 double symptoms of Bhava as mentioned in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Another question. At the stage of Nishta, whenever a devotee chants, every time he is able to see the form of the Lord and always chant with full concentration, irrespective of time, place, of circumstances. Yeah, he is able to always chant with attention, full concentration, irrespective of time, place, and circumstances. Actually, that is a symptom of Nishta. You're right. Right? So then, another question. I heard that Nishta, holy name, will reveal the Rupa of Krishna. Then we are remembering Rupa of Krishna. Is that what? I am not able to understand the question. Maybe you can rephrase your question. I'm not able to understand the question. Okay. Anything else before we move ahead? We discussed about the symptoms of Nishta. I'm just briefly touching this. This is exactly from Harinam Chintamani. I'm just quoting this from Madhurya Kadambini. Is it fine to think about Rupa before reaching Nishta? Well, not while chanting. Because while chanting, as Prabhupada says, just hear the holy name. So at least as far as possible, while chanting, we don't have to distract ourselves by thinking about Rupa. Prabhupada says, just hear the holy name. That's good enough. So we should endeavor to do that. Okay, so that is about Nishta. What about Ruchi? Because someone may say that I have while chanting very naturally, I am able to meditate on the qualities of the Lord. Maybe I have Ruchi. So now what are the symptoms of Ruchi? Okay, this also is from Madhurya Kadambini. Okay, so here he says, the golden coin of bhakti shining effulgently by the fire of steady practice and propelled by its own energy becomes fixed in the devotee's heart. Ruchi or taste for devotional activities appears. So which means after steady practice, one gets taste, right? Someone may say, प्रभु जी, मुझे बहुत taste है, कीर्तन में बहुत taste है. I can sit in kirtan for a long time. Maybe that is not necessarily ruchi. Because maybe we are attracted to the music of the kirtan more than actually the Mahamantra. So that is not true symptom of ruchi, right? When a person develops a taste for the activities of bhakti, such as hearing and chanting, which is vastly greater than attraction to anything else, that is called ruchi. So what is ruchi? Ruchi means when our attraction to the process of bhakti, to the limbs of devotional service, hearing and chanting, when it is so intense that we don't have that level of taste for anything in this material world, then that is the stage of ruchi. So otherwise, even now, it's not that we don't have taste for chanting. If we don't have taste for chanting, then why are we chanting 16 rounds, right? So you cannot say, I don't have any taste, but I chant 16 rounds. No, it cannot be. You have some taste. Some little bit of taste is there. It may not be, uh, at the stage of ruchi, but certainly some taste is there. But at the stage of ruchi, your attachment and taste for chanting and hearing is greater than any other attachment in this material world. That is the stage of ruchi. Okay. So you cannot say that, I cannot sleep for such a person will think that why am I sleeping for 6 hours? Maybe I should cut it down to 2 hours and use those extra 4 hours to chant more, to hear more. He'll be thinking like that. So that is actually ruchi. So unlike the previous stages, at the stage of ruchi, constant performance of hearing and chanting does not result in even the least fatigue. So a person will not feel अरे बाबा 2 घंटा से सुन रहा हूं, अभी थोड़ा ब्रेक चाहिए मुझे, अभी कितना है, अभी 1 हफ्ता का कोटा हो गया मेरा. He will not think like that, right? So at the stage of ruchi, constant performance of hearing or chanting does not produce even the least amount of fatigue. We have to ask, are we at this stage where, I can hear for hours and hours and hours together, but not feel fatigue, or chant 16, 32, 48, 64, and so on, and still not feel fatigued? Are we at that stage? So he says, ruchi quickly produces a great attachment to the activities of bhakti. It quickly produces a great attachment to the activities of bhakti. So these are the symptoms of ruchi. And this ruchi follows nishta and not the other way around. Someone should not say that I will very steadily practice bhakti after I develop some taste. मुझे थोड़ा रुचि डेवलप होने दो, उसके बाद मैं बहुत स्टेडीली भक्ति का प्रैक्टिस करूंगा. नो, फर्स्ट कम्स स्टडी प्रैक्टिस भक्ति एंड देन कम्स taste. And this is what Srila Rupa Goswami says. Syat Krishna Nama Charitadi Sitapya Vidya Pittopatapta Rasanasya na Rochikano Kintu Adarad Anudinam Kalusaiva Jushta Swadvi Kramad Bhavati Tadgata Hantri. He says, in the beginning, one may not have taste for the Supreme Lord's name, form, qualities, and pastimes may taste very bitter, but still, Adara Anudinam Kalusaiva Jushta. If with great respect, regularity, and regulation, if one continues to perform the sadhana, then Swadvi Kramad Bhavati. Gradually, one develops taste for that. So, like that. And then there are 2 types of ruchi. Actually, one is ruchi and the other is not exactly ruchi. Okay. What are the 2 types of ruchi? He says, that which depends on the excellence of elements and that which does not. Okay. I will give, he gives an example. Excellence of elements refers to an excellence relating to such things as the Lord's name qualities form. For instance, a person may only experience pleasure from Kirtan if it is pleasing to the ear and artistically sung. So you may say, प्रभु जी कीर्तन बहुत अच्छा लगता है मुझे, हाँ, एकदम बहुत रुचि आता है, आनंद आता है कीर्तन में, तो मे बी मैं रुचि का स्तर पे पहुंच गया, मे बी आई हैव रीच्ड द स्टेज ऑफ रुचि बिकॉज आई रियली लाइक कीर्तन. So if someone is singing without any sur or tal, it's absolutely very disgusting to hear. Will I still, do I still have taste to hear that kirtan? Okay. So whenever there is artistic singing, very melodious singing, then then I appreciate. But whenever there is no artistic or melodious singing, then I am not able to relish. Then that kind of appreciation is not ruchi. It is the first type of ruchi, which in reality is not ruchi. Or one may only relish topics of the Lord if they are delivered skillfully with literary ornaments and qualities. Okay. One may relish Krishna Katha only when it is spoken with lot of similes and metaphors and alliterations and lot of jokes and things like that. One may relish, if not, they may not relish. And one may only enjoy deity worship if all the implements, place, and materials are of high standard. And if it is not so high standard, one cannot relish it. So this is not really ruchi, actually. This is just like a person with weak appetite who, when notified of a meal, will ask what types of preparations there are and of what quality. If someone is really not hungry, then when they say, "Khana ready hai, prasad ready hai," then you say, "Kya hai prasad mein?" Huh? Or भिंडी सब्जी, ओ भिंडी सब्जी सूखा वाला या ग्रेवी वाला, हाँ, और ठीक से पकाया है कि नहीं पकाया है, और भिंडी के साथ क्या है, रोटी है कि चावल है. हाँ. So if 100 questions he is asking before even coming to the dining table, it means he does not have sufficient appetite. But if someone has real appetite, then even before the rice is cooked, he will be standing there with the plate. हो गया क्या, हो गया क्या, हो गया क्या, कुछ भी है डाल दो, भूख लग रहा है बहुत. So, but when one is very much concerned about the material qualities and material elements of kirtan or katha, then that is not real ruchi actually. The first type of ruchi is in which a slight trace of impurity remains. Therefore, if a person depends on the excellency of material elements of kirtan to experience a spiritual taste, one should understand that this is evidence of impurity in his heart. Okay. A person with the second type of ruchi will experience great pleasure wherever and whenever there is performance of kirtan. He does not depend on excellence of the elements because he has actual depth in his taste. One should understand that he has no trace of impurity in his heart. So this is true ruchi. The other one is not true ruchi. Okay. So further, how does a person at the stage of ruchi act? One of the very prominent symptoms of a person at the stage of ruchi is that he has a very deep regret over his past consciousness. Even though currently he does not have any material consciousness, but before coming to Krishna consciousness or before reaching the higher stages of Krishna consciousness, he must have had some material desires and material consciousness. So he has a deep regretful mood towards those past material consciousness, right? So, he speaks like this. Hmm? He says, "Oh friend, giving up the nectar of Krishna's names, why are you engaging yourself in pursuits of security and enjoyment which are so hard to attain? Huh? What can I say? I am unfortunate, for I am the lowest criminal. Even though I have received the mercy of the spiritual master, I have not understood its proper value. Instead, I have been wandering everywhere, and in that way, I have wasted my life." So, this is a strong sense of regret uh, for his past materialistic life. Uh, That is very significantly seen in this person. Keeping a precious jewel tied in the hem of my cloth, I have been searching out a cracked cowrie, a spot of false happiness between the banks of the rivers of material engagements. He thinks that uh, you know, there is Krishna Prem present within my heart, and keeping that Krishna Prem within my heart, I have been searching everywhere for some insignificant material happiness, uh, like that. And then he thinks, not practicing any anga of bhakti, I have simply manifested lack of energy. So deceitful I am, such is my sense of taste, that I lick up acrid tasting profane gossip like nectar and remain apathetic to hear the names, qualities, and pastimes of the Lord. Of course, he's not like this now, but previously he was like that. Huh? And now he's regretting how he had wasted his life prior to coming to Krishna consciousness, or prior to reaching a stage of maturity in Krishna consciousness. He thinks, how unfortunate I am. When I start to hear about the Lord, I comfortably fall asleep. And at any opportunity for vulgar discussion, I prick up my ears and become wide awake. In this way, I have contaminated the assembly of devotees and everything else. Old and bent as I am, what sinful act have I not performed simply for the satisfaction of my insatiable belly? I do not know what type of hell I will have to suffer for all my activities. Uh, In this way, the devotee will despair over his previous state of consciousness with a taste of disgust. He will be very constantly regretting his previous state of consciousness with deep regret. So this is the symptom of these are the symptoms of a person who has reached that stage of ruchi, where a sense of deep regret for his past life is very prominent at the stage of ruchi. So if we do not have this kind of a deep sense of regret, then probably we have not reached the stage of ruchi, and therefore we are not qualified to. The holy name will not naturally and spontaneously reveal the qualities of the Supreme Lord while we are chanting the holy name. Okay. And further, Madhurya Kadambini describes the activities of a person at the stage of ruchi. Okay. So here he says, then in a remote place like a swan, he will begin tasting and speaking reverent the nectarian topics about the Lord, the juice from the fruit of the desired tree, the great Upanishad Srimad Bhagavatam containing the mystic science of bhakti. So he will, in a very remote place, he will begin tasting and speaking with great respect Srimad Bhagavatam. He will converse constantly with devotees to the exclusion of all topics other than Krishna, like a curious spectator, first standing, then sitting, finally entering with full attention. Wherever some Krishna discussion is happening, he will be there. First, he will stand at a distance, then he will come close, then then he will sit there, then he will enter deeply into the discussion. He will take refuge in the Lord's dham and will fix himself purely in the Lord's service. So such a person will very quickly go to the dham of the Lord and try to reside there. Now, ignorant people will think that this person is going crazy. The blissful devotional service performed by the expert devotees is like a dance. The devotee begins to learn the lessons of the dance, being taken by the hands of the dance instructress Ruchi. He learns all, experiencing an extraordinary, unprecedented, unimaginable golden bliss which cannot be described. So, in what blissful realm will he come to exist when in time he is made to dance by the supreme masters of dance, Bhavan Prem? Okay. So, he says that the blissful devotional service performed by the expert devotees is like a dance. Okay. And now the person at the stage of Ruchi is ready to learn that dance now. And the dance instructress Ruchi is teaching him that dance. And while learning this dance, he is experiencing extraordinary, unprecedented golden bliss. And very soon he will become qualified to learn dance from the masters of dance, which is Bhavan Prema. Like that it is mentioned. Okay, this is how, these are the symptoms of a person at the stage of Ruchi, and how a person at the stage of Ruchi acts. So if we are not at this stage, if we are still enjoying mundane gossip and mundane activities and mundane things, then there is no question of our chanting the holy name, revealing the qualities. We should rather actually meditate or sort of focus on just hearing the name, rather than trying to focus on meditating on the form or qualities or leela of the Supreme Lord. Any quick comments, discussion points before we move ahead to the symptoms, to see the symptoms of asakti? Anything anyone would like to ask, share? Okay, if there is nothing, then we will move on. Yes, there is someone has raised the hands. AMD.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes,
Can you hear me, Prabhuji?
yes, I can hear you.
Prabhuji, my question is regarding this symptoms at the stage of Ruchi, like the one related to, about focusing on the externals of the special qualities. So should we also consciously focus on this aspect in our practice, or we should just focus on chanting the holy name and that these things will automatically come? Or do you think it will also help that like we really don't consciously care much about, okay, what kind of kirtan we are hearing? We focus more, we consciously neglect this part.
Well, in one sense, when we are not at the real stage of Ruchi, we naturally need some assistance. In the beginning stage only, we cannot say that it does not really matter, how the kirtan is done or how the class is given. I will enjoy it. The fact is you are not enjoying it. That is the fact, right? So we don't have to artificially imitate. Initially, we may need the assistance of these things, but gradually over a period of time, when we progress, we will learn to get the nourishment from the Naam and not from the external embellishments. But before we reach that stage, then definitely some kind of support is needed from mm, uh, from these kind of material embellishments like that. Is that relevant, bro?
Yes, Prabhuji, because I think, I mean, at least I have personally experienced this many times that sometimes senior devotees or some other devotees always say, like, when we say something like, oh, maybe this kirtan is not going so nice, they say, don't focus much on this music part and all. So that time, I think we become become confused that, okay, I mean, should not focus on it, or, because actually, as you are saying, that we are actually not getting that taste without external embellishments. And at that time, if someone tells us not to focus on these things, so then how should we respond? I mean, in that situation.
No, in that case, in that sense, you understand that these material embellishments are not all in all. But I have not reached that stage where I can appreciate this kirtan just for the potency of the holy name. But I do need these material embellishments. So you take that support initially, but gradually you try to transcend it. And you try to transcend it how? By first understanding that these are just material embellishments, um, and uh, and I should not just get stuck up here. So this, at least theoretically, you understand it and you accept it, and gradually, when you understand and accept it, and gradually over a period of time, some realization will also dawn in. So otherwise, we should understand that yes, but still, I may need that support initially, and it is okay. You understand your situation. So when someone comes and tells, don't get attached to this. Uh, to this material things, just the material embellishments, how it is sung and all that. You understand that yes, this is not the real thing, but considering my situation, I may need this support, but gradually I should know that I can't just get stuck up with this appreciating the material embellishments. So that we have to understand. But nevertheless, where we are, that's where we are currently. So we don't have to get really um, and demoralized because of that. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you.
Very good. Okay, there is another question in the chat box here. In the lower stages, should we focus on Krishna's Mathura Leela or Dwarka Leela rather than Vrindavan Leela? Well, yeah, definitely Krishna's intimate pastimes with the gopis and all that, certain in the early stages of our Krishna consciousness, certainly we should not hear. But Krishna killing the demons in Vrindavan, yeah, they are called as Naimittika Leela, pastimes performed by Krishna, where only those pastimes which are only performed when he descends to this material world, like killing the demons and taking birth, and those kind of pastimes, those we can hear for sure. But the intimate pastimes with the gopis and all that, that there is some qualification needed. We should not hear them prematurely like that. Okay. So, is there anything else? Okay. If there is no other further question or comments, I don't want to get into the symptoms of asakti because this this description is a very nice description. I don't want to rush through it. So let us take it next week only. So I think hopefully, let me just check how many more slides are left, and see if we can complete it next week. Just give me 1 minute. Let me check how many more slides are there. Yeah, I think probably we can comfortably complete. May not be comfortably, but I think we can still complete it next week. We will try to complete it next week, and then you will have one Wednesday off before the next course starts. So today is 29th. On 5th will be the 5th Jan will be the next Harinam Chintamani session. Then 12th Jan will be an off because we will need at least 1 week, 10 days to advertise the next course, next Wednesday course, so that people can register and all that. And then from 19th onwards, 19th January onwards, we will be most likely starting the book Bhaktya-loka. So this is also a book by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and the book discusses, it's not exactly a book, but it's a collection of 12 essays written by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur about the second and third verses of Nectar of Instruction. The 6 favorable and the 6 unfavorable things for progressing on the path of devotional service. So this is a series of 12 essays that Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote. So which was later compiled in the form of a book. So we will be discussing from this book starting from 19th January onwards. So please stay tuned, and you can register for that course and attend that course. So these Wednesday slots will be reserved for absorbing ourselves in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Granthas, especially written by the Gaudiya Vaishnava Acharyas. We will try to go a little bit deeper in discussing these books. So Bhaktya-loka is coming next. But next week hopefully will be the last session of Harinam Chintamani. If something is left over, maybe on 12th Jan also we may do, but most likely I will try to complete Harinam Chintamani next week. So thank you all very much for your patient listening. So hoping to have your association one last week for Harinam Chintamani, and hopefully for the subsequent books also in the weeks and months to come. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai, Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Sri Harinam Chintamani ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.